Okay, it's 2 o'clock, so I'm going to get started with the interest of time. Thanks everyone for joining. This is Thinking Thursday on nutrition labels under CACFP, also known as the Child and Adult Care Food Program. Today, Emily Mattern from the school nutrition side, she's a consultant for one of the school nutrition consultants. She is going to be presenting the second half of today. So thank you to Emily for assisting. We also have a few other CACFP analysts on, so they will be here to help answer any questions you guys may have. And then, like other Thinking Thursdays, you will be muted. However, if you have questions, please enter them in the Q&A section of the screen, not in the chat. The chat will be used for resources that we put in throughout the day or throughout the afternoon. And then the staff can easily see your questions in the Q&A spot. I'm going to turn my camera off just so I don't see myself and I'm distracted, but I did want you to see my face. If I didn't introduce myself, I'm Christy Hegner, one of the CACFP consultants. Okay. And if we don't get to all your questions, which I'm sure we will, because it's a fairly small group, we can always email us for more further assistance. We're happy you all could join, especially on this topic that is really important, but has, I would say, been neglected a little bit over the past several years. I did want to point out that our other Thinking Thursdays are posted on our CACFP training page. They can be found under the training tab. And if you scroll to the bottom, you will see where they are located. On the school nutrition side, they have, Emily has monthly, if not bi-monthly, Tuesdays at 2 training with a plethora of topics as well, where you can find on the school nutrition side as well. And at the very end, you will receive a certificate, but we do have a new way to go about receiving them, and I'll explain that at the end. It's a simpler way. It's worked well the last few months for us. And as you see in the chat, Emily has posted a few links already to get to the training sites that I just mentioned. Okay, we'd like to get to know who we're talking to today. So Emily's going to post a poll here. And if you are from one of these organizations, please let us know. We'll get a few more minutes. Looks like the last few responses are coming in. Anyone else want to add where they're coming from? Okay, well, looks like quite the balance. We have about 35% child care centers, about 20% sponsoring orgs, 8% school food authorities, and some family daycare homes. We have a little bit of every category except for adult daycare. So thank you for that. That helps to know who we're speaking to. Okay. So today's objectives. Today we will be discussing acceptable nutrition product documentation for administrative reviews. So we will, throughout the webinar, help you to determine credible foods using product formulation statements and child nutrition labels. We'll also go over how to find resources for those labels, the CN labels, also known as child nutrition labels, and PFS, product formulation statements, as well as to help you understand what is acceptable and what is required for administrative reviews. Now, I'll be saying this a lot throughout the webinar. This is what we're discussing is required product documentation. Now, I'm emphasizing this because you must have this proof for all the foods you serve at your center, school, wherever you're working, to be able to receive reimbursement for the foods. So this is not an option. It's mandatory to have documentation for all the foods you serve. Here's just a few examples before we get into the details about what documents are needed for what types of food, you might wonder. Specifically, which we see a lot of, store-bought combination foods, you'll need CN labels or product formulation statements. Now, we know a lot of places also do some homemade foods, and we'll be talking about standardized recipes that are required, as well as the CN label and or product formulation statement. So here's just a brief example of what you may need for, say, a burrito that's made from scratch. You would need a standardized recipe. Now, if it's a commercial or pre-made burrito that you find at the store or that you order through a manufacturer, you need a product formulation statement or a CN label. If you do not have those, then you should not be serving the item and cannot receive reimbursement if you do not have those documentations. So if you have not heard of the food buying guide, now is the time to tune in and learn how to use it. So also known as FBG, it is the principal resource to determine how a food contributes to the meal pattern requirements in all child nutrition programs. So that includes CACFP, school nutrition, summer foods, and it's for all the foods that you produce on site or purchase. Now, there's lots of ways to access it. Emily just posted a link in the chat. You can download the PDF of this. You can use the web-based tool or the mobile app. And there's also an online food buying guide calculator to utilize. It does take a little bit of getting used to, but once you use it a few times, follow the tutorials, it's really valuable tool to use. You may note when you do log in or visit the website that there are some features that you need to register to use, but just keep that in mind. This is a very useful tool. As a supplement, we have the CACFP crediting handbook. This is supposed to be complementary to the food buying guide. It contains additional information that may not be listed in the food buying guide. And it's extremely helpful in crediting food items. So as you see on the screen to the right is just an example of part of this very thick handbook. It will list several common foods that you may purchase or serve to your participants, and it will say whether it's credible, yes, maybe, or no, and then it gives a description. And oftentimes it references the food buying guide, so they really do work to complement one another. Now, one thing to note, this is not updated yet. Their USDA is working on it being revised with the updated added sugar rules that we have discussed in previous Thinking Thursdays. And I know Emily has had many trainings on it as well. So keep in mind that this guide currently does not contain the added sugar rules, but obviously those are in effect. And any future things that come from the new dietary guidelines obviously are not in that yet, but it still is a very, very valuable resource. Okay, one very handy label are the child nutrition labels, and extremely helpful in meal planning for your child nutrition programs. They are authorized by USDA and basically provide proof that that product meets the meal planner contribution that it states. These main dishes are, they focus on meat and meat alternative components when it comes to what the CN labels are used for. So examples like beef patties, meat pizzas, or meat and cheese bean burritos, breaded fish, foods like that are what you'll find child nutrition labels for. So let's get into a few examples of what is acceptable using child nutrition labels. So there are three different options that you need to have to show your analyst during administrative reviews. The first one being having the original CN label from the product carton, or a photocopy of the CN label showing that was attached to the original product. Now, this top right corner, to me, it's blurry. It probably is to you. That would not be acceptable because it's blurry, so it needs to be visible. You need to be able to read it. And then the third option is the CN label copied with a watermark, displaying the product name and CN number. This comes from the vendor, but also must, an invoice must come along with it as well for a watermark CN label to be a viable and acceptable document. So CN labels are the gold standard. They explain what is creditable very simply. And I'm just going to go through what an appropriate and acceptable CN label contains. So as you see, number one, it must include the name of the product. Number two, it must include the ingredients. Number three is the boxed in area where it shows exactly what amount it credits for the meal pattern. So for this example, a 4.5 ounce chicken stir fry provides 1.5 ounces of meat, 1 ounce of equivalent grain, as well as dark green vegetables, red, orange vegetables, and then other vegetables for, say, the school nutrition program requirements. So it gives lots of detail. That's where you want to find the information for how it credits your meal. And then you'll see the USDA inspection stamp on there, as well as the net weight. Here are a few other approved CN label examples. As you see, all the required parts that we just went over are on both of these. Okay, the next document that is acceptable are product formulation statements. So when a processed food is purchased without a CN label, you as the program operator should request a signed product formulation statement that demonstrates what the food, how it contributes to the meal pattern requirements. And this are typically provided for processed foods that do not have CN labels. Now, some details about product formulation statements, what it must include. A lot of information, as you can see. The manufacturer's name on letterhead, obviously the product name, product code number, serving size or portion size of the product, a description of what the credible ingredients are, including the total amount that it credits for per portion, and then how the ingredients contribute to the meal pattern or to the meal requirement, which we'll give some examples shortly. So again, as a reminder, it's great if you do have a CN label, you do not need one of these for that item. There are also templates found on USDA's website for product formulation statements, including for meat alternatives, vegetables and fruit, and grains. And we will be coming up in the second half of this where Emily's going to describe how to find these resources. So here's an example of the meat alternative template. I think Emily's going to be adding a link to the template page. It shows, this is just a blank example, obviously, as a template. And I'll be going into details showing a completed one in the next slide here. So this is an approved one for grains. So you can see at the top, the product name, manufacturer. I want to point out the serving size. And then it also lists if the product meets the whole grain rich criteria. It shows the grain requirements and where, what group it falls under, which Emily's going to discuss a little bit as well later in this presentation. And then in the graph, the chart, you see total credible amount is 2. So that means 2 ounces meat equivalent of grain for the serving size of 2.92 ounces. Here's a sample product formulation statement for lunch meat. This shows, excuse me, at the top, the description of the credible food, and it comes from the food buying guide. So 2.86 ounces of the raw portion of the credible amount. And then down below, so they rounded to 3 ounces under total weight under the lower red circle up towards the bottom. The 3 ounces of the meat equals 2 ounces for a credible meat alternative. And then note that the signature and date are on there as well, which is required. Here is another example of appropriate, acceptable product formulation statement for grains. So the serving size is 2 pancakes. And then down below, you'll see, excuse me, that it credits for 2 ounce equivalent of grains. Okay, here is an example of something that is not acceptable. Emily's also going to give some examples later on. It's a spec sheet. So it lists crediting information, which can be a little confusing, and it looks like it could be something, a documentation you could use, but it does not list the calculations of how they determine it, like say based on using the food buying guide. So this is not an acceptable document to use to credit any of your meal components. However, here is an acceptable one for the pizza. So you see under portion size, 1 slice of pizza for 1/8 of a pizza. Credits for 1 ounce of meat alternative. And then again, it's signed and dated. So this is for the meat portion of the pizza. The second one here that I'll show is for the grain. So again, 1/8 of the pizza crust is counts for 2¼ ounce of grain requirement. And then I also like to point out, again, the whole grain rich requirement. They checked yes, so that counts as your whole grain for the day, because we know at CACFP we need to have at least 1 whole grain per day. Okay, I believe this is when Emily's going to take over.
Hello, everyone. I'm Emily Mattern. As Christy said, I'm going to keep us moving along. Um, the CN Label Authenticator is a document that is on the USDA website, um, and it can be helpful in verifying if something has a CN label. It is a very long list that gets updated, I think, twice a year, but you can verify items CN label. Some, like a lot of USDA tools, some things are they try to be helpful and they're not as helpful as I would like them to be. But anyway, that is a resource that is there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about actually finding CN labels and product formulation statements. There's three main places to look. One is a distributor website. So if I know we have mostly maybe some of the child care centers are large enough to buy from a broadline distributor, such as Gordon Food Service, Van Eerden, Cisco, or US Foods. I know a lot of you shop at the grocery stores as well. And so we'll also talk about some manufacturer websites and then calling just the customer service line directly. Okay, so if, for example, you happen to be a Gordon Food Service customer, they have, you can look on their website. Go to the next slide, please. If you are, search their catalog and you look for chicken nuggets, you can get their, look at the description, you scroll down, click again. We have a scrolling slide thing here for this. And if you click it again, there we go. So we scroll down and there's school lunch equivalents that are listed. And this is very helpful information. So we can see that, 5 of these nuggets give us 2-ounce meat alternate and an ounce of grain. However, this is not considered approved documentation for our purposes for the child nutrition programs. So good information, but not acceptable documentation. So go to the next slide. They have a separate, at least at Gordon Food Service, they have a separate spot on their website that has CN label information. So if you can use their experience.gfs.com, then it's under their resources and you go to K-12 or education and K-12 schools, and then you'll find the K-12 documentation. We also have the direct link as well. We can get that in the chat for you. And it'll take you there directly. When I tried it this week, there's this like Google spot that says a 403 error, but if you actually click on it, the list still came up, and then it's listed by the GFS reorder number, and then you can get the CN label that way. And I will just say that you can, even if you don't get a truck delivery from GFS, you can order items to the stores that they have. If there's a store that's near you, and you can buy a full case of some of these items. And so sometimes that is helpful if because then you can have those CN labeled products, and so that you know that it meets the child nutrition program requirements. I'm not sure if other of the distributors have things like that make it available, but I will say too, I've even seen like at Costco and some of the warehouse stores that they do carry some CN labeled products as well. So, okay, so if you don't have access to buying foods from a distributor, then we're going to have to go to the manufacturer websites. And I put on the screen on this slide a number of different manufacturers. And when you are looking for the child nutrition labels, or a product formulation statement, you're going to want to go to the food service or um, the food service websites and not the retail ones for the grocery stores, because it's the food service ones that are going to have the documentation available. So just a couple of different brands, because you guys are aware, like there's the brand names, and then they own a whole lot of other brands as well. So with Kellogg's is now two. Kellanova does the snack foods like Pop Tarts, Eggos, Rice Krispie treats, Morningstar Farms. WK Kellogg is their breakfast cereal. With General Mills, you're going to have Pillsbury, Yoplait, Nature Valley, Annie's, Betty Crocker, Gold Medal. And all of these, they do regular school business, and they are used to providing the CN labels or the product formulation statements that child nutrition programs require. Tyson is, think of chicken, but they also have a number of beef products. They actually own the Bosco Sticks, State Fair, Corn Dogs, Advanced Pierre, Jimmy Dean, Hillshire Farms, Ballpark Franks. They're all under that Tyson umbrella. And again, find like the K-12 area of that food service website, and you should be able to find the CN labels and product formulation statements. Land O'Lakes does cheese. Hormel covers Jennie-O turkey, Planters peanuts, Skippy peanut butter. Conagra has Max Pizza, and Krusty's waffles, pancakes, French toast, things like that. So that's just a sampling. Oh, and I forgot to mention, on the GFS website, on that GFS experience page before you get to the list of the CN labels, they do have a link that has a manufacturer contact information. Again, not necessarily going to be everything, but it's a place to start. And you can also just, use your friend Google and find contact information that way. So if you're striking out on the manufacturer websites, calling customer service is a great way to do it. This is just a snapshot off a cereal box, General Mills 800 number. You should be able to find on retail packaging the information to contact their customer service, and then you can ask about child nutrition labels or the product formulation statements. Okay, standardized recipes. So if you're making an item from scratch, we need to have the standardized recipe to know how it meets that meal pattern. And a standardized recipe just means that it has been tested multiple times and measured for a consistent yield. And why is that important to use standardized recipes? Because it's consistent. No matter who makes it, you're going to get the same result each time. The food will taste the same. Your students, your kids can count on it. Then when you make macaroni and cheese, it's consistent. And then you also know how it will meet the meal pattern. And that's really what's important for us, right? Okay, so let's take a deeper dive on standardized recipes. So this is one of the USDA standardized recipes. And a standardized recipe needs to include a lot of different information. So first off, we need a recipe title and description. So this is a beef tamale pie. And it contains lean ground beef combined with tomato paste, vegetables, spices, topped off with whole grain cornbread and baked. Okay, so recipe category, and then list of ingredients. So just like a recipe you got from grandma, here are the different items, and there's a longer list than this, but this is what fits on the screen. So we have list of ingredients, then we need the weight and or volume of each ingredient. So home cooks, we're used to the measure, but some things we're going to have weight. And if we did see the full list of ingredients, we would see the beef, ground beef that's in there would be listed by weight, because we usually would think of a pound of ground beef or whatever, but we measure garlic powder in teaspoons and tablespoons. Okay, then we'll have preparation instructions. So the directions of how to mix it all together and prepare it, and then crediting information. So based on the recipe, we know that 1 piece provides 1.5 ounce equivalent meat alternate. I think that says 3/4 cup red orange vegetable and 1 ounce of equivalent grains. All right, next slide. We have a few more required things for a standardized recipe. So we would need to know the cooking temperature and time. That is required. The serving size is very important because that definitely affects the nutrition and the crediting. Because if we have that, if we're getting 20 pieces out of the pan or 25 pieces, that makes a big difference. So, and then that recipe yield. So this sample recipe is in 50 servings or 100 servings. I'll show you in a second. We have available some smaller sized standardized recipes as well. And then equipment that is used is also helpful. So there can be a variety of formats, but those are the pieces of information that we want to see on that standardized recipe so that we know each time we make the recipe, cut it in, for this example, 5 by 5, 25 pieces per pan. We're going to get that same crediting information that credits towards the meal pattern. Okay, next slide. So the child nutrition recipe box is a fantastic reference to find standardized recipes. Hopefully you are aware of it already. So you go to that recipe drop-down menu, and then you can see that there are CACFP specific recipes for, and they break them down by the different quantities. So the family child care homes are 6 servings for the recipe. Child care centers have 25 and 50 servings. There's some adult recipes. And then you can, if maybe you have a very large center, then if you look in the school section, then they're 50 and 100 servings per recipe. So standardized to meet the requirements each time you make it. Okay, does the standardized recipe calculate the grains, etc., crediting once you put it into the recipe? So in the food buying guide, they do have a recipe analysis workbook, the RAW, they abbreviate it for, and you can put in ingredients there and it will give you crediting information. So that's in the food buying guide, the recipe analysis workbook. It doesn't give you like calories and fat information, but it does give you crediting information. Okay, so another piece of information that's available to us is the nutrition facts panel. So that's the label that you're used to seeing on retail packaging in the grocery stores. And we need to have different nutrient information from that. So next slide. So there's a lot of good nutrition information on the nutrition facts label. So some of the things that we usually look at specifically for child nutrition programs would be the serving size. So that's, based on this amount, this is the, calories, fat, and everything that is for it. So that serving size is critical. Then we have the calories. Then is sodium, saturated fat and trans fat, and then added sugar. In the school nutrition programs, we have dietary specifications that we need to meet with calories and sodium. But even with the child and adult care food program, you definitely need to watch your added sugar as well. So this is just good information to find a healthier thing. Because if you do compare labels in the grocery store, you'll see that there definitely can be differences in sodium between products. And so looking at that is a good idea. Ingredient statements are also found on our packaging, and that is important for two main reasons in the child nutrition program. First, it's going to tell us if the product is whole grain or whole grain rich, because that first ingredient. So on this ingredient statement, we see the first ingredient is whole wheat flour, and the second is enriched flour, bleached. So this is a product we can serve. It's whole grain is the first ingredient, and so that means it has the most in it. And then the other flour is enriched. Another important thing is allergens in the product. I'm sure that you have children that you care for that have food allergies or intolerances. And so looking at the ingredient statement for that contains statement is very helpful. The contain statement calls out the most common 9 allergens that we have in the US, and that includes wheat, soy, milk, eggs, fish, shellfish, peanuts, tree nuts, and sesame. If you have kids with other allergies, you're going to have to read the ingredient statement more carefully to see if those ingredients are listed. Okay, so let's talk more about the grains. So we do look to see if it's made with enriched flour or whole grain flour, whole wheat flour for our programs. But then the Exhibit A grains chart helps you figure out the ounces of credible grain products when you don't have the recipe or a product formulation statement. Christy just put in the chat the link to the chart, and then the QR code on the screen is actually to a short training that we have, an online training module about how to use the Exhibit A grains chart. So the grains are grouped together in similar groups. They're based on similar a makeup. So you look at the finished weight of the product. So let's say you're gonna serve a bagel, maybe it's a half a bagel, but you're gonna serve a bagel for breakfast. And so you should be able to look on the packaging of what size that bagel is, or if you have a kitchen scale, you can weigh it yourself. Bagels usually are bigger, maybe it's a 2.5 ounce bagel. So then we would look, so a bagel is in group B, and then we look at the middle column, and it says that 1 ounce equivalent grain is equal to 28 grams or 1 ounce of the product. So if our bagel is 2.5 ounces, then it is going to be 2.5 ounce equivalents grain. So maybe you're just going to give them half a bagel to meet your grain requirements. And so each group has different amount of grain in the product, and so then it credits differently. So Exhibit A grains helps you figure out the grain equivalent on a finished ready to eat product. A helpful tool for us is the WIC approved breakfast cereal list. So it meets the same added sugar standards. WIC meets the same added sugar standards that we have for CACFP. And so, WIC participants shop in grocery stores. So these are items that can easily be found at your local grocery store. And Christy just put the link in the chat. Okay, so some other documentation that you might come across are product specifications sheets or product fact sheets. If you've ever been to a food show or had a broker visit you, these might be the papers that they hand you to give you more information about it. They don't take the place of a CN label or product formulation statement, but they can still provide valuable information for the menu planner. Okay, so I have a couple of examples for you. So this is a specifications sheet, not a product formulations statement. It does have lots of good information. Gives us the, it's a all natural sliced turkey breast, gives us product features and attributes. It even has on the right hand side a box with a signed statement that says that 3 ounces will provide 2 ounces of meat alternate. So that kind of seems like it's a product formulation statement, but it doesn't show us the calculation and what it from the food buying guide. And so this would not be a product formulation statement. So then we can go to the JTM meatballs. This again is a product specification sheet that has lots of good information. This one lists all of the nutrition information. And then it does give us the CN statement, including the CN ID number, but it is not an actual copy of the CN label. Now we could take that CN number and then go look it up on that big long list on the USDA website that I mentioned first off when I started talking, and then you could verify it that way. But again, we don't have a signature on this or the calculation, even though it actually does tell us what the CN statement is. This would not be considered acceptable documentation during a review. Okay, so organization is key, because even now you're probably feeling your mind spinning with all of these different kinds of labels and how am I supposed to keep track of this? So important to create a system so that your labels are easily organized. Create a filing system that works best for you, your agency, so that you can be consistent. If it works better electronically, you can keep it electronically. If you like paper and having a files or a binder, I've seen them organized that way. That works. Something that works and makes sense for your system. Have a filing system so you know where the labels are and that you have the correct documentation. If you add new menu items, add that new label into your filing system. And then also it's important to keep them current because formulations can be updated. And so periodically, maybe an annual basis, check to make sure that your labels are still current and the documentation is still correct. Maybe, if you have a student that with sensitive food allergies, maybe you're going to be doing it every time you buy items to make sure that you have the correct things. But keep that documentation up to date, keep it organized. Okay. So in summary, the only way to ensure that processed food products provide the stated contributions towards the child nutrition meal pattern requirements is to provide proper documentation. That can be the actual CN label with a watermark, and then with an accompanying invoice to show that you purchased it, a product formulation statement, or that nutrition label with your Exhibit A grains chart to show the grains equivalent, or having a standardized recipe. We do have a number of different resources. Some of these have been shared already, but the USDA website does have a whole section on on child nutrition labels. Some of it is targeted towards industry and manufacturers, but you can learn from it. They do have a tip sheet about evaluating the documentation, is so you understand if this is what you have is acceptable for a review. That food buying guide, yes, you can look up individual items, and as I did mention, there's the recipe analysis workbook as well. so you can help figure out the crediting information for recipes. CACFP has a grains resource as well. And then there's meal pattern training worksheets that have helpful information as if to help train your staff or for review for yourself. Okay. How are we doing on questions?
Let me see.
Looks like we've had
Terry's
some
helping us out.
answered. Yeah.
It looks like we were all caught up. I think one person put a question in the chat. Um, let's see. It says, does the standardized recipe calculate the grains, etc., crediting once you put in the recipe?
So if you do have like a nutrition analysis software tends to not necessarily give you the crediting information, but if you go to the food buying guide and the recipe analysis workbook, that can give you crediting information, or it's it's doing the math breakdown. If we have 10 pounds of meat in the recipe, and so 16 ounces in a pound, each person gets a 2-ounce meat equivalent. You do the math to show that if I have it in 16 portions, everybody's going to get the right amount that fulfills the meal pattern. Or if there's however many pounds of fruits or vegetables in the recipe, okay, I can show the math that it provides a half a cup. It's how those standardized recipes work.
Can I just
Do you
add
wanna
a
go over
couple things as a reviewer in the field?
Please.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay. So pretty much if you're serving like a combination food, we want to see either a standardized recipe showing how those items credit, or if you're serving like, let's say, a Stouffer's mac and cheese or something from Gordon Foods, we want to see those labels. Otherwise, it's really hard to tell if it credits or not. The other option, sometimes we just tell, folks that, combination foods are great, but maybe you just need to start small and start with a couple recipes, right? You can also, let's say you're cooking up spaghetti and meat sauce. Serve the meat separate from the noodles. That way you can for sure ensure that each kid gets the correct portion size. So those are just some different things. We see a lot of processed meat products such as bolognas, pepperonis, hot dogs are a big one. It's really not a best practice to even serve those items. So if you can avoid it at all costs, that's really your best bet. Otherwise, we do need to see labels for those items showing how those credit. Now, some of them, you will be able to find perhaps labels for if it's like a beef bologna or something like that, or even an all beef hot dog. But again, there's probably better options out there. I think I just wanted to put that 2 cents in about that. The other thing that I see a lot is the corn chips. Corn chips, I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, Christy or Emily. They have to be made with whole corn. So there's several different ones out on the market. And when we're out in the field, we see ones that don't meet that requirement. So those are just my 2 things that I wanted to throw out in.
And that is super helpful, real world experience. So that's where, reading the ingredient statement, is that a whole corn chip? That is really important. And those The CN labels and product information statements are to help us know that it credits for the program, because Terry mentioned hot dogs, bologna, chicken nuggets. Since we didn't make it, we don't exactly know what's in there. I mean, we can have an ingredient statement, but the quantities. And so those CN labels and product formulation statements are documents from the manufacturer saying that by our recipe, these will meet the nutrition standards and the meal patterns for these programs.
Can I add one more thing that I just thought of?
Absolutely.
So I guess and actually just thought, I just forgot what I was going to say, to be honest with you.
It's all good.
I'll think of it in just a second, I'm sure.
Okay. So a question in the chat, is there going to be a new allergy training coming our way? I see the federal government is mandating it. So there was a bill tacked onto the Whole Milk for Healthy Kids bill that does require food allergy training on an annual basis for child nutrition programs. I actually just emailed USDA today asking if they had any updated information on it, and they do not. They will let us know as soon as they can. So stay tuned. But that is going to be something that we're going to be needing to do probably in the next year. And I probably personally will be working on some resources, and whether it's an online training module or a recorded webinar that people can use for the training. We will have some support for you on that.
It looks like someone has their hand raised. Linda? I think I unmuted you there. Nope. I'm trying. I believe you should be able to talk now, Linda. I apologize if it's not working.
So
like you're
Dwayne asked, he makes lunch from scratch. How do I document? So that's where that standardized recipe comes in. So you'll need to, based on the quantities in the recipe and how many servings you're getting out of it, then you look and see what are the credible ingredients, fruit, vegetable, grain, meat, and what the portion sizes are for in that recipe. And that's how we know how it credits.
I did put the link to the certificate in the chat, or you can use the QR code. Someone was asking. I'll put it in the chat one more time. So we're getting a lot of questions in the chat. It's much easier to use the Q&A feature so we can kind of keep things separate. But Linda, if you're not able to speak, if you could write your question or comment in the QA spot, that would be great.
And Christy, or Emily and Christy, I remembered what I was going to say.
Great. Go for it.
Yeah. So about standardized recipes. So there's several from the USDA, but some of them have a gazillion ingredients, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a good place to start, but we have all this technology at our fingertips these days. So I'm a proponent of using ChatGPT. And you can tell it what you want, and you just say, I want a macaroni and cheese recipe. Well, then it might come up with a gazillion, ingredients. Well, then you can tell it, I want to use these items, make it compliant for CACFP, and you can create your own standardized recipe that easy. So I'm just saying it doesn't have to be anything elaborate, but it can be done just with technology, or you can utilize the USDA recipes.
Exactly. Great tidbit, Terry. It's super helpful. Just confirm whatever you put in AI, just confirm that it makes sense. It's typically pretty good when it comes to recipes.
With the training certificate, you don't have to put in your sponsor number. It's just for our own tracking. But the information you need should be is on the screen. So you have the title of the training today, the date, Christy and my names, and you get an hour for this presentation.
Kelly, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of add on to what Terry said. As a reviewer, when we go out on site, one of the first things that we do is look at your menus. And so if your menus have anything that looks like a combination meal, we're going to immediately ask for those standardized recipes, the product formulation statements, all of the things. So it's super helpful if you do that too. When you're creating your menus, take a look at it and look and see, is there anything on here that looks like it might be a combination meal or a combination item? And when in doubt, email us, ask us. That's what we're here for, is to help provide support. So if you're like, hey, do I need something for this? Just reach out to your analyst, reach out to Emily, Christy. Any of us would be happy to help you with that information. And it's always better to ask up front and get a clear, concise answer than it is to wait for your analyst to come out and then get a finding for the fact that you don't have proper documentation. So please reach out for support. But as you're collecting those, you don't have to collect them every single time you put it on the menu. If you're buying the same mac and cheese from Gordon Foods monthly, get the label once, put it in a binder, put it in an envelope, upload it to Google, whatever it is, however you track your stuff, and then you have it for every single time. I would also recommend be consistent. So if you're buying mac and cheese from Gordon's and you get a label from there and you know that it's creditable, don't go to Walmart and buy a different brand of mac and cheese because it doesn't credit the same. So try to be consistent for that.
Thanks, Kelly. So someone's not sure if you saw it. For those that are, it shows requiring a sponsor number, just put zeros for the certificate. And as Terry put in the chat as well, as a great reminder, we have training modules for child nutrition labels, online modules that you can also receive my registry credit for. And for those that do have my registry, if you attended this training for the full length, you will receive my registry credit. It will show up in your account within the next few weeks. Okay, it looks like our questions are answered, if I'm not mistaken. Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks to the analysts for helping, and of course to Emily for helping present today. Hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. Bye everyone.